poner en el chat para se anotarem a falar su nombre, su partido e su país, que Débora me va a enviar para que eu les chame uno a uno, les invitando a hablar. Ao final, le doy la palavra a los amigos de Cuba para sus despedidas e comentários e encerramos la reunião e la transmissão. Então, precisamos que todos cierrem sempre sus micrófonos durante todo el tiempo, porque vamos a estar transmitiendo y cuando uno deja su micrófono encendido, isso não é bueno para a transmissão virtual, online, que vamos a hacer. Compreendido?
Muy bien, Mónica, muy bien, muy bien, muy bien.
Buenas tardes, Mónica. ¿A dónde?
Está saliendo el audio por la transmisión.
Sí, Mónica, buenas tardes. Estoy acá de La Habana de Cuba. Ahora. Sí, buenas tardes, Mónica, de La Habana de Cuba. ¿Me escuchan? ¿Me escuchan? Solo disculparnos y pedirles 5 minutos porque tenemos una demora. Que nos den 5 minutos para empezar.
Sai.
Ya mira, ponte una varita si quieres. Una varita que están ahí. ¿Por qué? Por eso, pero ahora no hay audio. Mira, ahora nadie va a decir su
Un día, sí, ¿verdad? Pero qué plan.
Sí, seguro un poquito. Hay mucha gente también. Ahora. Nadie está hablando, nadie está hablando. Oye, están las bolitas encendidas, ¿verdad?
Sí, sí.
Apaguen todas las balitas y a menos que no las vayan a usar.
Pero los compañeros requirieron que las encendieran. Parece que ellos estaban haciendo alguna prueba de sonido.
Sí, vamos a apagar las balitas y vamos a explicarle a los compañeros que se la pongan que deben encenderlo. Porque hay mucho ruido ambiente. No está saliendo por allá, yo lo regulo. Pero hay mucho ruido ambiente. Entonces, se lo explicamos al compañero Polanco, se lo explicamos a la compañera. Sí, ¿tú me escuchan? ¿Me escuchas ahí probando? ¿Me escuchas? Sí, no importa, es así bajito. Sí, no te preocupes que vas a escuchar bien aquello. Sí, ¿me escuchas ahí?
sí, terminó. Cuba sí, terminó. El pueblo cubano vencerá. Mi pueblo vencerá. Todos los pueblos vencerán uno a uno. Vamos arriba, compañeras y compañeros.
Buenas tardes, compañeros. Se nos escucha desde Nicaragua Libre.
Buenas tardes, compañera. Desde Chile.
Buenas tardes.
Un abrazo a todas y a todos.
Igual.
Del Ecuador, Partido Comunista del Ecuador.
Desde República Dominicana, Alianza por la Democracia.
Buenas tardes. From el Partido Revolucionario de la República Democrática Popular Laos.
Muy bien. Desde Chile, el Movimiento del Socialismo Allendista. Un abrazo fraternal y allendista.
Un saludo para todos desde el Perú, Olger Salazar, del Partido Comunista.
Saludos desde el Frente Amplio de Uruguay. En este mismo momento se está haciendo un acto frente a la Embajada de Cuba en una entrega simbólica de 200.000 jeringas a partir de la solidaridad del pueblo uruguayo y de las cubanas y cubanos residentes para contribuir rompiendo el bloqueo. Un abrazo también al Frente Sandinista en su aniversario ayer.
Todavía está apagado.
Para que pueda escucharlos ahí.
Sí. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, probando. Ajá. Y entonces, ¿con seguridad yo puedo ir siguiendo eso ahí?
Y cuando sale, para. Si usted sale, para hacer algún comentario,
para ahí.
Y después lo va a seguir.
Está bien.
Ahora lo que viene, usted sabe eso del momento. Ahora lo que tenemos es un video introductorio y después ustedes. Esta introducción que le da la palabra a
¿Y Johanna va a llegar?
¿Tú estás clara del guión?
Está en camino.
Jefe,
Bien.
¿comenzamos? Ya está ahí, oye.
Muy buena.
Buenas tardes a todos, disculpen, que nos pusieron saliendo para acá, me pararon el carro por ejemplo, una declaración para denunciar presión en Estados Unidos que están aquí de todos los países para que se renuncien a condenarnos. Digo, claro, no puedo otra gente, no, yo creo que no conozco esperando ahí a las 4:30. Y entonces como los muñequitos ahí.
¿Y ya denunciamos?
Ya lo saqué, tuve que hacer un Twitter y espero el camino para acá.
Ponla sin poner. Alito, si pones el labio, ya pones la imagen.
No, está bien así, tranquilo.
Estás bonita así, Johanna.
Ay, tú me quieres. Yo a ti. Donde tú digas, Bertica, donde tú digas. Oye, el partido se está preparado para esto. Yo me acuerdo cuando Alzuaga me la enseñó. Ay, mi corazón, a ver tu padre, ¿qué te hicieron? ¿Qué te hicieron los malos?
Ah, mire, hicieron un cartel ustedes especial.
Mónica va a hacer un
Qué bien.
y va a presentar a Polanco.
Ajá.
Polanco con la palabra introductoria y después te presenta a ti.
Ok.
Yo tengo la responsabilidad de presentarte.
Es un honor para mí. Dime qué tiempo, 10, 15, 20, ¿qué tiempo?
Que tú quieras.
20. Ok.
Métele
Ay,
pasión.
ponle agua,
Ponle
Bertica.
corazón.
Yo hice ahí en otra reunión que está. No, voy a incluir la denuncia esta porque esto fue ahora mismo.
Dale, sí.
¿Estamos listos? Está listo ya.
¿Y aquí qué es lo que es?
Y para hablar se puede quitar uno esto. Ay, gracias. Ay, porque yo no puedo hablar con él.
Oye, eso no todavía. Es Mónica Valente primero. Ya Mónica hizo su introducción. Dale la palabra. No, pero dale la palabra ahí primero.
Dile a Mónica que salude de nuevo.
Dile que repita todo de nuevo ahí como...
Sube.
Hola Mónica. Hola Mónica, buenas tardes para todos. Desde Cuba ya estamos listos.
Buenas tardes, queridos. Estoy lista. Cuando quieran, podemos iniciar la transmisión. Pido que todos cierren sus micrófonos, por favor.
¿Dónde yo abro aquí?
El mío está cerrado, ¿verdad?
Esta tarea nosotros, de ser el enemigo ahora de la reacción del imperio y de ser también la esperanza. ¿Por qué no? Y de ser...
That's also the hope, and we should be the banners of holders of socialism, and we are ready to defend it using a lot of experience and what we have learned from what we have seen and the comparison we can make.
Compañeros desde Cuba.
Carlito, que hable Mónica primero y después video. Mónica, me solicitan que usted por favor inicie con las palabras.
Ok, estoy iniciando. 3, 2, 1. Cuba vencerá. Soy Mônica Valente.
Cuba shall prevail. I'm the Executive Secretary of the Sao Paulo Forum. Cuba shall prevail. They are fighting people, happy, and active revolutionary people, whose government is committed with the well-being and rights, with the sovereignty under the leadership of the Communist Party of Cuba. That's what our beloved Cuba is like. First, we would like to commemorate the proclamation yesterday of the results of the election in Peru that led to the triumph of Pedro Castillo. We do congratulate them from the Sao Paulo Forum. We congratulate Pedro Castillo and Tina Bolag ticket. The people want inclusion, want dignity, want. As we know, the key, the essence of the many difficulties being faced by the city people and government of Cuba is the U.S. economic blockade that was imposed since 1960. The Trump administration tightened it in a cruel manner. It put Cuba again in the list of countries that sponsor terrorism, canceled agreements on sports and medical cooperation, eliminated travel, remittances, and exchanges between the two countries. It limited student exchanges and sanctioned 35 Venezuelan oil tankers for bringing oil to Cuba. Trumpism imposed 240 sanctions on Cuba. We are having audio problems.
Mónica, no la escuchamos.
No se oye, Mónica, no se oye, Mónica.
Mónica, no la escuchamos.
El sonido, Mónica. Se perdió el sonido.
Tiene silenciado el micrófono.
Es de Mónica.
Mónica, estás muteada.
Sí,
Where was I? Comrades, Cuba shall prevail. I am Monica Valente, Secretary of the Sao Paulo Forum. Cubans are fighting, active and revolutionary people whose government is committed with their well-being and rights and with the sovereignty of the country under the leadership of the Communist Party of Cuba. That's what our beloved Republic of Cuba is like. First of all, comrades, I avail myself of this occasion to hail and commemorate the results of the election results in the sisterly country of Peru that brought about the triumph of Pedro Castillo. We congratulate wholeheartedly them as the Formula Castillo-Yohalte ticket. People won. Dignity won. Inclusion won. Go forward, Peru. As we know, the key point of recent history and the immense difficulties our sisterly Republic of Cuba is going through is the economic blockade being imposed by the United States that has been in place since 1960. The Trump administration tightened it cruelly. It put Cuba back in the list of countries sponsoring terrorism. It canceled agreements on sports and medical cooperation. It eliminated travel, remittances, and exchanges between the two countries. It limited student exchanges and sanctioned, just to give you an example, 35 Venezuelan oil tankers for transporting oil to Cuba. Trumpism imposed a total of 243 sanctions to tighten the blockade. Since Joe Biden took office in January this year, none of these measures has been changed, despite of his campaign promises. In July this year, once again, the UN General Assembly passed again a resolution asking for the end of the U.S. blockade on Cuba. 184 votes for it were cast and only 2 were cast against it. That is, those of Israel and the United States. On July the 11th last, there was a Machiavellian operation from abroad to bring about chaos in Cuba. Intentionally, it was said that Cuba has achieved, the news that Cuba had achieved the first Latin American vaccine against COVID-19 was hushed up. A Spanish expert showed fully that the manipulative operations used robots, algorithms, and new accounts for the occasion with the objective to echo messages calling for violence. Last Sunday, the people, thousands of Cubans, went out to the streets to defend their revolution and their sovereignty and their government. Throughout the week, in many parts of the world, we held and saw many rallies, including political parties, people, activists, social movements, VIPs and political leaders, and social and cultural leaders who showed their solidarity to Cuba and its revolution. Very strong and wide and smashing shows of solidarity to express our thanks to the immense solidarity and humanism Cuba has historically shown to the world and provided to the peoples of the world and to humanity. This afternoon, we are in this virtual meeting called Cuba Shall Prevail between the Communist Party of Cuba and the Sao Paulo Forum and other friends of the world, like Bailey of China, who is a deputy chief of the Department of the Communist Party of China. Then from Vietnam, we have Comrade Yong Quang Nguai, first vice president of the Foreign Affairs Commission of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of Vietnam. From North Korea, Hee Ju, political advisor of the People's Democratic Republic of Korea. From Laos, from the Laos Revolutionary Party, we will have Anufoni Tishirachi, the ambassador of the People's Republic of Laos to Cuba, and we thank her very much for her attendance. Also, we will be having leaders from over 25 countries of Latin America and the Caribbean, and members of the Sao Paulo Forum as parties. This afternoon, we are here firstly to express our solidarity to Cuba. Secondly, to ratify the unity among the political parties and leftist organizations of Latin America and the Caribbean in the defense of the Cuban Revolution, and mainly to have an update on the situation in Cuba. To such purpose, we are having Rogelio Polanco, who is a member of the Secretariat of the PCC and head of the Ideological Department of the Communist Party of Cuba, and also Comrade Joana Tablada, who is Deputy General Director for the United States Relations in the Cuban Foreign Office, who we greet and thank for her presence. To begin, let's have show us a short video with the always wise words by our eternal leader, Fidel Castro.
Muchas gracias. El video lo vamos a transmitir.
We cannot hear the speaker. We are going to transmit the video over the networks. The link for the forum site is in this 8 multiplied by 8 format. We won't have that possibility here in the hall, in this room. We are working based on our experience, what we have learned, and what we are seeing now, and the comparison we can make. And I trust history, and I trust the people. Totally. And we can continue analyzing problems. I am sure of what I said to everybody. We are going to resist, and we are going to overcome. And we should be as good soldiers as there hasn't ever been ever, or as patriotic as nobody has ever been. We must We have to be greater than the heroes of Numancia and Saguntos. They will know and see what heroic people are like. And they have no right to despise us, nor do we have any right to be mistaken. And we must continue. If we work with dignity and education, we can produce the cultural and material goods human beings need, and we must struggle tirelessly to create them. To our brothers and sisters of Latin America and the world, we should say that the Cuban people will overcome.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, dear friend and comrade Monica Valente, for your words, which are always passionate and full of conviction, and also for this chance to hold this important virtual meeting with our friends from the Sao Paulo Forum. We convey to all the Sao Paulo members our warm greetings from the Communist Party of Cuba and from the Cuban people who are now waging a permanent battle to defend our revolution. Today we are having a very special day because we're having this possibility, this chance of holding a meeting at which we will share updated information about the situation in our country, and also we will also feel the solidarity feelings and the unity we have with the many friends of the Sao Paulo Forum in the face of the attempts at subversion, in the face of the intent to promote unrest and to carry out a communication, media, terror, and cyber war operation against our country on the part of the United States. Today, the Cuban people, as you have called this event, are overcoming. To begin this exchange, I would like to give the floor to our dear comrade, Joanna Tablada, who is the General Deputy Director for United States Relations of the Foreign Office of Cuba, so that we can start discussing some of the present issues we'd like to share with you about. Welcome, Joanna, and I will give the floor with your permission. Good afternoon to you all. It is a great honor for me to be here to talk to our friends in the leftist parties and the Sao Paulo Congress. All Cubans know this is a great solidarity and resistance platform of the social movements and the struggle of our peoples, like this platform, like this forum. I thank you for the invitation, and I propose to give you a short summary of the situation of bilateral relations with the Cuba and the United States and the context where this new aggression is taking place. Briefly, we don't have to tell the story to our friends, the whole story. We thought that everything had been tried, mercenary invasion, a continued economic war policy, a constant misinformation, psychological war, and political involvement campaigns, policies, isolation in every sense. But now we see that we are being attacked in a different way by imperialism. It is trying to carry out an operation. Polanco will elaborate later on it, as he saw a different experience in sister or similar experience in sisterly Venezuela. But it is a new adventure, this new chapter of an unconventional war, of fourth generation war, that is being waged. True, the U.S. has failed in its policies to defeat the Cuban Revolution through rhetorical and coercive unilateral measures, actions that were refined by Trump and his administration, and which were assumed and continued by the Biden administration. That was not expected by many people after he criticized the method that had been used against us. But we must admit that that policy that is deliberately and surgically created and implemented to harm Cuba in the shortest time possible was somewhat successful, in the sense it caused hardship and anguish when it deprives our country to access indispensable resources for the benefit of its population and for the development of its economic and political project of social justice. The fact that during the pandemic 243 measures, sanctions were applied by Trump, apart from the blockade, 55 of which took place during the pandemic, reinforces Cuba's argument that the United States has been using the pandemic to wage war against Cuba. This leads to a deterioration in bilateral relations that poisons them. When Biden was inaugurated, and you discussed the last few months, you see that the relationship is artificially poisoned and marked by a policy that was always associated to pretexts and falsehoods. I will just remind you some of them to you, that Cuba was training armies for torture, that it was enslaving its doctors. There were attacks against the lofty medical collaboration programs Cuba has in the world, particularly in the third world, and there were attacks against Cuba's contribution to human rights by using all kinds of slanders. 3 years ago, National Security Advisor Bolton said that the task had not been fulfilled fully because the Cuban Revolution still had those big myths. Actually, it is the great achievements, and that the U.S. should go all the way to try to destroy those myths and do away with that sympathy Cuba enjoys in the world. And then the tremendous persecution and harassment against the medical brigade started, and that surgical anguish caused by the problems to bring fuel, the fuel that is needed by the families to live. Many shipping companies were sanctioned, and that was done in a way of the pirates and the corsairs. Even though we are in the 21st century, they punished insurance companies, and they reached out for the Cuban economy's jugular. So the Cuban economy started showing symptoms of problems because reserves went down, the GDP went down, and also we have to have in mind that tourism went down because of the pandemic, and that's the time when they decided to carry out a coup, which actually failed. Unfortunately, I know that many countries of yours, and when you watch CNN in Spanish, they have been repeating once and again that there are protests in Cuba, but the fact is that it is a machinery that is reproducing fake news, fake videos, and even fake photographs. For many people, it's not easy to understand what's really happening. Not you, because the leftist forces have been facing and fighting that kind of maneuvers, but we have been denouncing it anyway for these days. They have presented children who supposedly are dead and they are alive, but I will leave this part to Polanco. I wanted to say that actually, if you want to summarize the actions of the U.S. government without making any difference between Trump and Biden, because there hasn't been the slightest change in policies and the slightest sensitivity to the many calls that the international community and multilateral organizations and Friends of Cuba and many countries of the world, and of course the permanent denunciation of the Cuban people have been taking place. A single finger has been moved to alleviate the suffering of the Cuban people, of which the U.S. government is responsible. The great objective of the U.S. government, and I will say slowly because that is the core of the matter, is that they are launching the biggest campaign of measures so that a country cannot function. Even if I am not successful, if there are things that are going wrong, because if I close the window, you cannot have air. If I don't open the faucet, I cannot have water, and so on. Then there will be less things, less food, and less water, and so on. And if I prevent you from developing fully, there will be some results for me. The U.S. policy has been implementing that top pressure policies and has tried to hold Cuba responsible for the impact of those criminal policies. That's the core and the essence of what's been happening in the last few years. That's the essence of what's been happening. Suddenly, there is some candor in the last few days by the U.S. government. It has came out of the closet where these very plans that have been brewing for a long time since the Trump administration and which have been implemented by the Biden administration, now they have to carry out a campaign to tell the world that the Cuban government is to be held responsible, but the U.S. government is to be held responsible. Anybody would say that is not honest. It is not. Anybody could say this is cynical, and it is. That's what's happening. It is not possible to separate 60 years of economic war and 243 additional measures, including leaving Cuba out of the recent Biden decision. And that's why I'm saying this U.S. administration has comfortably taken up the rhetoric and the plans from Trump, because there was an issue, an order to revise unilateral measure sanctions that limit the capacity of states to deal with the COVID-19. Cuba was left outside that plan. Why has there been the ratification of such a fraudulent and scandalous definition as stated by the U.S. official that a country that is exemplary when it comes to fighting terror, they nevertheless say it qualifies as being a country that sponsors terror? How can they go so far, as we have seen in the last few days, and say before TV cameras that Cuba cannot distribute not its vaccines? They don't even say that Cuba has its own vaccines, but how can they say that one of the best public health system of the world and I think this is not an overstatement, and the indicators are there, even under the blockade, and with a health model that is international reference, one of the best in the Americas for its results, and the many decades of work on it, doesn't have the capacity and needs international organizations to come here to carry out the vaccination program. That would be humiliating for Cuban science. Cuba only has a few scientific centers. The U.S. has thousands. The purpose of that is a change of regime and eliminating for the Cuban population those methods, those resources. That's the reality we are seeing today. The rhetoric is also that the U.S. is doing all this to support the Cuban people. That's a lie. The U.S. is not taking sides with the Cuban people as it was never in our history. They have never made the mistake of taking sides with the best interests of our people. They were not taking sides with the Cuban people when Cuba was the last country in Latin America to get rid of the Spanish crown. They just left the Cuban patriots alone, and they opportunistically intervened to occupy Cuba as they occupied Puerto Rico. They were not with the Cuban people when there were two bloody dictatorships during the neo-colonial republic. They supported Machado and they supported Batista. They support the heirs of the Batista regime who are now pressing cowardly in the U.S. so that the U.S. policy includes their vengeance and domination. And they're not taking sides with the Cuban people when after 60 years of constant measures to make our social project fail and to attack a country they are again today going out of the world and make frantic statements trying to capitalize on and turn lies into facts and to unmask truth and present it as a lie. As the slogan of the event says, Cuba shall prevail and the United States once again will fail. Not even a magician would convince anybody that the Cuban Revolution is to be blamed for the economic predicament of our people. We are not hiding our mistakes. You just have to read the speeches by our leaders to see the everyday efforts and constant efforts being made to make adjustment to our reality and to improve what we have to do every day in any sphere, in every sphere of our lives. But what's not right and what we Cubans will not accept is that they put aside what has been or ignore the greatest cause of the Cuban generations on end. Perhaps there isn't a theme. There's no thing that has called for the participation of Cubans more than their independence and their fight and the struggle for their future. A few minutes ago, there is a denunciation because we have just known by some friends that the U.S. government that had just failed for the 29th time to justify the unilateral sanctions system, the biggest one in the country with 184 votes against it, are again coming out of the multilateral system to use bilateral blackmailing and blackmail sovereign states so that they vote against Cuba. We have proof of that. We have the names of the countries that have been blackmailed and threatened through the most illegal and despicable methods so that they vote with the United States in this new aggression. Many people in the world have opened up their eyes in the last few days after Cuba's denunciations. If you ask me, why is the United States doing that? Biden promised promised something else. He did election campaigning and said that it would alleviate the suffering of the Cuban people and the Cuban families because of the Trump measures. And now he is implementing them and is enthusiastically joining the efforts to offend our doctors, our scientists, and our population, because unfortunately we see again that a country that claims to be what it is not is now yielding once again, as many times before, to the interest of small interest groups, because many Cuban Americans didn't vote for Trump, nor did they support him. But, and I can say with the knowledge I have, and we receive people come from the United States, that there is not a majority support today in the U.S. to the blockade, just the opposite. It was imposed coldly, as was the setback in the last few years. Universities having collaboration with Cuba were happy. The 22 agreements that were signed in important spheres for neighboring countries, even with great differences, showed that it was possible to work and make progress in another way, away from the usual one. However, the U.S. Congress, most Democrats cast a vote, one vote, and then you have to understand why things happen. Biden has been under many pressures. We know that he's ill-advised, and each time the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, who is an enemy of every progressive cause in the world, Bob Menendez, has been connected with Cuba only for his origin, because he doesn't live in Cuba. And as Tagore said, you cannot love what you not know. And again, he's pressing the Biden administration with blackmailing for nominations and budgets, appropriations, and those are the shameful reasons, the true reason why this is happening. This is a system, not a person, that we are facing. It is a system that does not tolerate such a challenge as the Cuban Revolution or other processes in Latin America that went all the way to destroy us, but there are also specific situations that have to do with the coincidence of minority but very reactionary sectors, and some are fascist even, to press a government that has a government that is doing all the time what it says, or it claims that it is, but it is not. I ask you to be on the alert, that make your denunciations all the time, because imperialism will continue attacking us. Some are even emboldened when they talk about the Cuban people. They are talking about something else. For them, the only Cuban people are that small group that is responding to their interests. There is a lot of money in the subversive U.S.-Cuba policies. If it deprives the Cuban population from its public service, it's trying to criminalize the Cuban state. And anyone who comes to a hotel in Cuba and you stay there, what is earned there goes to medical services, not to any private person. When we talk about remittances, and they say that the Cuban government is taking those remittances, but that's a lie. That people have been killed or made missing in the last few days, that's deliberate manipulation. They know what they're doing and why they are lying. Fidel said something I remember now. The U.S. people may support unjust causes, but for that they must be deceived. he said it when we were accused of having biological warfare projects, also during the Elian case. If the aggression continues, but the resistance and the denunciation of using the intelligence of peoples and arguments and real facts to make them face lies, no matter how powerful the platforms that disseminate them, will always prevail. Thank you very much. Patria o muerte, venceremos. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, our dear comrade Johanna Tablada, for her statements, for her information, for the passion with which she defends our ideas. Also with us in this exchange, the comrade deputy Yolanda Ferrer Gomez, president of the Foreign Affairs Commission of the People's Power Assembly of Cuba, and Ángel Arzuaga, head of the International Division of the Central Committee of the Communist Party, coordinator of this division, as well as other comrades, members of our Central Committee, officials from the International Division of the Central Committee. If you allow me, Johanna, I will remove my mask in order to speak much more easy or easier. Johanna dealt with some items related to U.S.-Cuba policy, which, as we know, has been unjust, cruel, and genocidal for more than 60 years during our revolution, looking for what they have called a change of regime, which is no other thing but to impose on us the strategic objectives pursued by its policy against the independence and the sovereignty of the Cuban nation. And for us, since the memorandum we always remember, and recently our foreign minister referred to Lester Mallory, the former Undersecretary of State of the U.S., who wrote that it was necessary to bring about hardships of the Cuban people. And this was as far back as 1960. This was expressed very clearly by this Undersecretary of State to bring about hardship, hunger, desperation among the Cuban people so that the Cuban people would rebel and oust the Cuban government. This is a policy that has been designed, financed to bring about destabilization, to aim at causing all sorts of hardships and difficulties. And the economic, commercial, and financial blockade imposed by the U.S. government is a fundamental element of that. With different dimensions, it affects all aspects of our everyday life. It is the main obstacle to our economic and social development, as you very well know, because you have accompanied us throughout all these years with your militant solidarity in support of our people and in condemnation against blockade. These affects our health system, the medicine supply, the stability of power generation, and it generates numerous problems in the everyday life of all Cubans. In the context of a tightened blockade, after the introduction of 243 measures by the Trump administration, which have been fully kept by the Biden administration, these conditions created by the pandemic affecting the whole world, generating a global crisis, a global economic crisis that has affected not only Cuba but other countries of the world. Under these circumstances, the U.S., in a cynical, opportunistic, deliberately and cruel way, has tried to create greater damage to our people. Therefore, they have taken advantage of these circumstances to create maximum pressure measures to reinforce the sanctions against our country. This is part of the design they have historically pursued, but they have taken these to what they call the soft blow against Cuba as part of the non-conventional war. they have resorted to these limitations to bring about social unrest in our country, following political communication operation, media terrorism operation, media warfare, media terrorism operation to discredit the work of our government. The U.S. imperialism has increased their efforts using funds as have been systematically denounced by our country to generate inside Cuba the creation of counter-revolutionary groupings to the service of their interests. These are agents of a foreign power. Therefore, they are mercenaries that used to pursue their goals to undermine the domestic order in our country. This has been rigorously established in the non-conventional warfare manuals, as have been implemented by the U.S. in other countries of Europe, Latin America. Some others have called these a hybrid war or a fourth generation war. They have followed the so-called nonviolent war tactics to generate chaos, to destabilize the internal orders, alleging violation of human rights, and using the symbolic and capital and mobilize more and more people to pursue these destabilization goals. This strategy is resorting to the use of the mass media, and now with the digital space and the domain of important media powers, important transnationals in the digital world have distributed the world in the digital space, replicating all these narratives to generate lack of governance in our countries. This, of course, I mean, in all these days, we have seen the so-called fake news, distortions, manipulations. They have looked for the way in which to generate these emotions with the attempt of creating a virtual reality around the real situation in Cuba. All of these have been carried out by the media, aimed at reaching big audiences. They have the control of the big information flows based on algorithms they intend to impose on all countries. And they have managed to promote these narratives. The purpose is to break the will of human beings, to fracture institutions, to undermine national unity, and for that, they have invested abundant resources. This is not an improvised thing. What happened in Cuba recently? Days before July the 10th, there was a political communication operation aimed at intoxicating the media financed by the U.S. government and the political machinery of Florida. The main purpose was to encourage social unrest and destabilization in the country, taking advantage of the conditions of the pandemic and the tightened blockade. The owners of the networks have unleashed an unprecedented hatred among our citizens, among a sector of the Cuban population, as a result of the objective they have been promoting for many years without being in the least scrupulous or ethical. They have introduced images filled with blood, vandalic acts, harassments of opinion leaders so that they could make a statement with regards to Cuba. And as was recently mentioned by Johanna, they have resorted to pressures on foreign governments. After defeating these destabilization attempts, they have made evident their failure. They have resorted to big data, cyber terrorism, to promote the fabrication of primitive elements to carry out violent acts and influence the so-called international influencers. This reminds me a lot what happened in other sister nations, such as Venezuela. I had the opportunity to share with the Venezuelan people for some years, to share with the Bolivarian revolution, to witness the non-conventional and media warfare that was faced by the Venezuelan people. And they are now applying a similar manual to Cuba. The world is witnessing Cuba, is watching Cuba through the networks, which is a lie, trying to portray that the whole people has taken to the streets against the government of Cuba. This is the image the international media is trying to portray in the networks, and for that they have resorted to every sort of manipulation. But as we have evidenced during these days of struggle against this political and communication operation, and has been shown by other peoples in the world, there's no technology or strategy whatsoever powerful enough against mobilize people with strong convictions, with a history that they should defend. And side by side with the people, you will find our party, the organization, mass organizations, and the national unity, which has been able to keep the peace and quiet of the population, respect and solidarity, which are an essential part of all Cubans, as have been shown by many years of our relations with brothers and sisters all over the world. In the face of all these criminal actions and the instigation of violence, our revolution and our organizations will exercise all the power vested in them by the Constitution and the laws in a sovereign way, and in support of our constitutional order, and of course granting all necessary guarantees with regards to the individuals who have taken part in these actions as established by our Constitution. In Cuba, we have a social system ensuring protection for all Cubans regardless of their opinions, their political positions, including under the conditions of the pandemic. We recognize the efforts made by our people, our workers, our students, our society in general, our population in general. Under the present circumstances, our people has stood up to face the pandemic also under the condition of the blockade. The entire world has witnessed all the guarantees that a society like ours is capable of granting to our entire people. We see no exclusion, no inequity in Cuba. We do not see people starving in the streets as a result of the pandemic, as we have recurrently seen in other countries, which have extraordinary resources which could have otherwise been invested to avoid this. The confrontation of the pandemic in the case of our country, I mean, we believe we might have done better given the conditions of our society, but the way we have done it exceeds by much the way in which other countries with more resources have been able to handle it. Our pandemic infection rates is way below as compared to the rates in other countries of the region. This is essentially the struggle for the well-being of our people. We can tell our friends of the Foro of Sao Paulo that reminding us of ideas of Fidel, Raúl, and our president Miguel Díaz-Canel. We will defend our revolution. We will always act abiding by our laws in a transparent way, in a permanent consultation with our people, and we will do so with full determination, as we did it during the weekend when our people in several cities of our country took to the streets to defend the revolution in a determined way, expressing the way in which we want to move forward with our socialism, with the participation of our people. Right now, the country is working as usual. Of course, we have absolute normalcy with regards to the government institutions, and we are receiving numerous messages of solidarity from organizations, from other international entities in support of our struggle and rejecting this operation perpetrated by the U.S. government to do away with the Cuban Revolution. The U.S. government has attempted to impose the metrics that there is a failed government in Cuba, and this is being said by the U.S. government trying to generate these actions. The government has continued to work here in Cuba, also analyzing the way in which we can cope with the different circumstances which are lacerating today the continuity of the work of our nation, particularly when it comes to the economic and social strategy that is being implemented by our government to try to, in the midst of the blockade, to try to promote the development of our economy. We continue to implement, as I said before, our economic and social strategy. We have recently adopted the updating of the economic and social development model at the 8th Congress of our party, and we have also updated the guidelines that govern the economic and social policy of the party and the revolution. During a recent event held by our people, in rejection of this aggressive action, our first secretary, Comrade Miguel Diaz-Canel, said that we will dedicate our full heart to all the difficulties, to solve the difficulties. So we are ready to work with full will to eliminate difficulties, to look for solutions, and to resist in a creative way, as our president said. Right now, we have been faced a situation with power generation, a complex situation due to the difficulties that we have to access the fuel supply sources. As Johanna explained, we have been subject to permanent persecution by the U.S. government and its agencies to try to prevent fuel supplies to our country and to generate difficulties for our power generation. We have been facing such difficulties in the last few weeks that have caused blackouts in several of our cities, and this added to the repairing works and instability at some of our power generation plants. This was also opportunistically used by the U.S. government as part of this operation I explained before. They have tried to portray an uncontrolled sanitary or health crisis. They have even cynically referred to the possibility of a humanitarian intervention. And of course, we know what this is all about. Given the experience that other countries receiving that euphemism has had, which has been accompanied by the bombs of military interventions. Of course, we will continue to move ahead with our model to cope with the pandemic. We are doing our best so that this year the entire Cuban population would be fully vaccinated. But saying that under the conditions of a blockade, saying that and doing that with our candidate vaccines resulting from the ingenuity of our science and the quality of our health system. I mean, it is very easy to say it, but this is a real feast of the Cuban socialist system, the extraordinary vision of Commander-in-Chief Fidel, who created a system of science and health and primary health care to ensure the economic and social development of our country, we have already the first Latin American and Caribbean vaccine named Abdala with an efficacy rate above 90%. And in the next few days or weeks, we will have a second vaccine called Soberana, which will enable us, with our own very limited resources of our science, to see to it that our entire population would be fully vaccinated. This will also be placed at the service of our sister nations, because today we are facing the geopolitics of the meanness with vaccines, in the distribution of vaccines. There is more and more a lot of differences, the unequal exchange promoted by capitalism and neoliberalism in our countries. So that huge success is something that we share with our brothers and sisters of the Forum of Sao Paulo, and we are sure that you highly assess this gesture of our revolution. We right now continue to face these circumstances created by the pandemic, but we are sure we will overcome them. Right now, we can already say that more than 2 million Cubans have received the 3 doses of our vaccines, or candidate vaccines, and therefore we can say that around 20% of the Cuban population already vaccinated, and we will continue to increase these figures in the course of the next few weeks. 28% of our population has received at least 1 dose of our vaccines. This is an absolute priority for us. Under the conditions of the blockade, how much could we have done shouldn't we have this infamous blockade? In the case of the vaccines production, this has also prevented us from doing it in a more expeditious way, in a more intensive way, to have a higher production of these candidate vaccines. In the midst of this situation, we continue to allocate financial resources to stabilize the production of highly demanded medications. We should remember that we have also suffered from deficits in the production of medicines locally, but an important part of our medicines are locally manufactured. More than 50% of the medicines that we used in the basic medication system in Cuba are manufactured in Cuba. But for that, we need to import raw materials, and we have had difficulties in accessing them due to the blockade. In this regard, we are more and more looking at the way to satisfy the needs of our people. We are trying to identify the problems that could be analyzed by our government, so that amidst our difficulties, we could find out greater possibilities to access to the imports and to be able to export our products, which are always persecuted in the international market. We believe this is the moment to call for greater participation of our people in decision making. Our government has intended to go to the places facing more difficulties, to our neighborhoods and communities facing difficult conditions, to be able to solve problems that have accumulated through our years, so that our people, in an organized way, accompanied by our mass organizations, could help and solve the problems that required the support of our institutions and our government. We will continue to promote also the socialist state enterprises, the main economic actor of the company, of the state. We have carried out important transformations in our economy. This is an enormous feast in Cuba. In the face of a tightened blockade, we have taken bold measures that have enabled us to experience a transformation when it comes to the development of our economy, and this also means the advancement of the non-state sector in our economy. We have required the participation of self-employed workers. We have promoted the creation of medium, small enterprises, both state and privately owned, to be able to bring about an audacious transformation in our economy to generate greater wealth and greater well-being for our people. In this regard, we have also continued to develop our scientific centers and our universities so that science could become a factor in the development of our society and the development of our economy. Therefore, dear brothers and sisters of the Sao Paulo Forum, our revolutionary homeland, the Cuban Revolution continues to stand firm, continues to move ahead in the face of the blockade, in the face of the aggression, and in the face of the terrorism the U.S. government has tried to impose on us. And in that struggle of our people, we are sure we will be able to count on the support and solidarity of all of you. Thank you very much.
Sempre com Cuba.
There are many peaceful ways in which revolutionaries, and where revolutionaries who are not satisfied and even non-revolutionaries can manifest themselves. But the proposal was not a peaceful proposal. Yesterday we had vandalic acts. Stores were there. We have the center campaigns, those who want to be with both the revolutionaries and non-revolutionaries. Now they condemn the blockade, but they say that we are not seeking a political solution by making the people to face the people. We did not do that. We called the people to defend the revolution and the rights. We have been comrades. I'm going to put a link here so that you can hear the video, because here in the 8x8 platform you can only see the video, but you cannot listen to what it is being said. We have been suffering many difficulties. The Cuban Revolution has done away with hate, dishonor, and crime. It is important that we seek the profound causes of violence and fulfill our duties so that we will have the brave people, the honest people, the just people, the honorable people, the happy sons and daughters of this Cuban land. Yes. Monica. Thank you, Polanco. Thank you, Juana Tablada, for that important presentations that were very clear and with a lot of information for all of us here in the Sao Paulo Forum, as well as for our friends abroad. Now, as we will have the presentation of Comrade Che Beiling, Deputy Chief of the International Department of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of China. While we hear Che Beiling, those of you who would like to take the floor, please put your name, country, and party in the chat so that I can take the list. So now I'll leave the floor to Shane Bailey, Deputy Head of the International Department of the Central Committee of the Cuban Communist Party of China.
No.
Tenemos la
Shane Daly, are you here with us? Well, it seems that Shane Bailey is talking, but we can't hear her. We can't hear her at all. Can you hear me now? Yes, now we can hear you. Thank you. Comrade Polanco and Comrade Johanna, we thank you for your presentation because it informs us about the real situation and the latest events in Cuba. Your presentation also helps us to know the actions taken and the reaction by the Cuban party and government regarding the events on July 11. That has you have been able to establish normality once again.
霸权维护本国正当权利的决心和勇气，深表敬佩和支持。
We express our support to the decision taken by the Cuban people to defend its sovereignty as has been pointed out by the Cuban side. The U.S. blockade for more than 60 years is the root cause of the hardships of the Cuban people. And recently, with the COVID-19 pandemic, United States has stepped up its measures against Cuba, causing more suffering and hardship to the Cuban people. The blockade is also the root cause of shortages of medicines and energy in Cuba, or power supply, as well as the fall in tourism. The blockade hinders the Cuban people's effort for development and has had a negative impact on the financial and economic relations of Cuba with other countries in the world. Recently, the General Assembly of the United Nations has adopted for the 29th consecutive time and with a majority the lifting of the economic, financial, and commercial blockade of the United States against Cuba. This is a universal call by the international community.
和原则及国际关系基本准则，同古巴改善关系，全面取消对古巴的制裁，并且为古巴人民克服疫情发挥积极的作用。
We call United States to improve its relations with Cuba in accordance with the purposes of the UN Charter and to have a positive role in helping the Cuban people to overcome the impact of the pandemic. We cannot deny the rights of the Cuban people to seek happiness and development cannot be denied. China always calls for international law compliance and the imposition of unilateral sanctions to other countries, be them economic, political, or military. We consider that the right of all countries to choose sovereignly their social and development model should be respected. China firmly supports Cuba in its quest for development based on Cuba's reality. And this is a matter only for the Cuban people. Anything else would be interfering in the affairs of Cuba. We support Cuba in its struggle against the pandemic and in improving the living conditions of the people and in maintaining social stability. We are going to increase our friendly relations between Cuba. Thank you, Comrade Shen Bailey, Deputy Minister of the Department of Foreign Relations of the Central Committee of the Chinese Communist Party. It is a pleasure having listened to you this night. Now, I give the floor to Ezequiel Adamo from the Communist Party of Argentina. Ezequiel, you have the floor. Good afternoon to all. I thank you for the opportunity of taking the floor. I want to thank Comrade Polanco and Comrade Joanna and the members of the Cuban Communist Party who have given us all this detailed information regarding recent events in Cuba. It is obvious that we need to increase our solidarity with the Cuban Communist Party, with the Cuban people, and with the Cuban government. I want to support the work being done by the Cuban media for the information they are providing, because otherwise we need to rely on the biased information in our countries from media that can be considered friendly media. The news are also distorted. They ignored the reaction on July 11 by the people to fight the disestabilization actions. They ignored the mobilization last Saturday in Havana with Comrade Diaz-Canel at the Malacon Drive. So, though obviously we will not believe the information provided by imperialism, it is still very important for Cuban media and for the social networks to talk and tell about the truth and broadcast this to Latin America. Why do we say this? Because it's a way of providing solidarity, irrespective of what the situation that we had in our country before the Cuban embassy. It is important to have the correct information so that we can discuss with our people in the universities and colleges, in neighborhoods. We need to talk about this so that we can generate solidarity with Cuba. The Argentinian people supports Cuba. They have historically supported Cuba and Cuba's support in the cause of the Falkland Island. I remember that when Fidel was here, there was a meeting was going to be held in the university, but we had to change the venue because too many people wanted to hear him, wanted to listen to him. So you need to know that Argentina, the people of Argentina will always support Cuba, the revolution, Fidel, Raúl, the party, and Comrade Diaz-Canel. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ezequiel. We have 14 people who have requested the floor, so we kindly ask you to be brief in your presentation. I now give the floor to Carlos Alejandro of the Frente Amplio of Uruguay. Carlos Alejandro, you have the floor. Can you hear me? Yes. Well, my love to all of you. Very briefly, I want to express our satisfaction for this meeting. I want to greet Polanco, Alzuaga, and comrade of the leftist party of Europe, Consul also, who was online, and comrades of the Sandinist Front that have been celebrating the anniversary of the revolution, and the comrades of the Chinese Communist Party who were also celebrating the anniversary of their Communist Party, and to all those who are today supporting revolutionary Cuba. Today there was an act before the Cuban embassy here in Montevideo. The Secretary General of the National Trade Union, Marcelo Abdala, spoke at that meeting or congregation. I want to talk about what Hector Frajinal told us, the Cuban ambassador here in Montevideo, who summarized the events in the island. I want to thank him for the solidarity that that all these organizations have shown towards Cuba in these recent days when it has been attacked by counter-revolutionary forces. Those gusanos who are living in Miami. Please receive from the Frente Amplio and from the different organizations in Uruguay our solidarity and our thanks for the generosity of Cuban doctors who have operated more than 100,000 Uruguayans here in the Jose Marti Hospital in Montevideo, as well as to those doctors Carlos, well, thank you, Carlos. Now we will give the floor to Lungwen Hitange, Deputy President of the Foreign Affairs Relation Commission of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of Vietnam. Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Yes, we hear you perfectly well. Okay. Esteemed comrades present or attending this very important meeting. The Communist Party of Vietnam is very happy to attend this meeting with the Latin American sisters and brothers as well as sisters and brothers throughout the world to hear about the information by Cuban comrades regarding recent events in your country. On behalf of the leaders of the Vietnamese Communist Party, I would like to convey our most cordial greetings. Comrades and friends, demonstrations for provoking disorder in Cuba on July 11 is just one of the many actions against the Cuban Revolution by the reactionary forces to bring down the unity of the Cuban people by discrediting the democracy and human rights in Cuba as an excuse to interfere in Cuban internal affairs. In this context, we highly value the organization of this virtual meeting by the Sao Paulo Forum and the Cuban Communist Party to publicly inform about the truths of what is happening in Cuba and the huge damage of the embargo to the Cuban people, hindering the efforts of the party, the state, and the Cuban people to overcome the negative impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Today we are living in a global and integrated world where the UN Charter and the basic principles of international law should be defended and promoted as the conduct standards in international relations both for big and small countries. In Vietnam, we resisted the policy. We should promote cooperation, dialogue, and finding peaceful solutions to the controversies and not unilateral coercive measures. With that spirit, the party wants to demand the lifting of the blockade measures against Cuba that affect the social and economic development as well as the lives of the Cuban people. Dear comrades and friends, the party and the state and people of Vietnam have always highly valued the special relation between Vietnam and Cuba. On this occasion, I would like to reaffirm the Cuban comrades our solidarity and friendship uh, of the people, party, and state of Vietnam towards the Cuban government and Cuban people and Cuban party. We are willing to join forces and help Cuba in their economic and social model, increasing the relations between our two countries. Vietnam We, on this occasion, the Vietnamese Communist Party wants to reaffirm our wish to consolidate the good relations and solidarity and cooperation with the Sao Paulo Forum, as well as with the political parties who are members of this important forum. We will fight together to develop or build a better society, which is possible. Thank you. Thank you, Comrade Tani, for your words. It's a source of happiness and pleasure for us to receive you in the Sao Paulo Forum. I'm going to continue with the speakers in our list, and I want to inform you that I will give you the email of the Cuban Communist Party, the Foreign Affairs Commission of the Cuban Communist Party, so that those of you who cannot take the floor can send your message. Once again, I ask the speakers to please be brief because we have many, many in the list who would like to speak. I now give the floor to Comrade Condeja of the Communist Party of Peru. After Leonel, then Esteban Silva from the Socialist Movement from Chile. So, Leonel Falcon from Peru, you have the floor. Thank you, Comrade Monica. Can you hear me? Yes, we can hear you. I'm going to avoid the protocol greetings. We love all of you, those in the chat and those who are not in the chat. What we want to say is we want to ratify our commitment and our solidarity towards the Cuban Communist Party, the political vanguard of the revolution. Our solidarity with the Cuban government led by President Miguel Díaz-Canel Bermudez, our solidarity with the Cuban people, which we admire because of their dignity and for having endured for so many years, for more than 60 years, the actions of imperialism. We in Peru cannot deny our solidarity to Cuba. Cuba has shown its solidarity with us in many, many occasions. During the earthquake In the 70s, Cubans donated blood for the Peruvian population. More than 50,000 Peruvians died. In 2007, in my region, we received the humanitarian help of the Cuban people through the Henry Reeve Brigade. And in 2017 and 2018, we received the support when the floods to combat dengue and chikungunya in the northern part of the country that was flooded due to the El Nino. And more recently, we have received a contingent of the Henry Reeve Brigade to fight the COVID pandemic. So why wouldn't we be thankful to Cuba? Peru has been consistent with Cuba during the Velasco regime. The regime government, we helped Cuba very much. And during the independence, Leoncio Prado fought for the independence of Cuba against Spanish colonialism. In the OAS, the symbolic vote of Peru against or in favor of Cuba by Raúl Porra Benotchea, our foreign minister. He's from Pisco, where the earthquake hit. So you must know that our hearts goes to Cubans, and we will reject any aggression from the empire. On Friday, in the city of Lima, before the Cuban embassy, we had a political activity. The Sergio González, the Cuban ambassador to Peru, to whom we expressed our full support, was there with us, defending the Cuban embassy that was attacked by counter-revolutionaries in the early hours of the morning. They attacked the Cuban embassy. It is painful for us to see actions like this, but it's also a source of motivation. I want to end by saying that our love goes to the Cuban people, our acknowledgement of its example, our love to Commander Fidel, and to all Cuban comrades that are a source of dignity for the big homeland. We have to be direct and sincere. Thank you, Lionel.
Compañera Mónica.
Sí, por favor.
Sí, con esto termino. Solamente
I will conclude. Just a recommendation as a friend. Many who held Cuba said Cuba with you until death. Now they are playing in the hands of the empire. USA is financing subversion in Cuba, Bolivia, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. In Peru, USA is financing an NGO that claims to defend governability, but it is trying to rule with Pedro Castillo. We are on the alert there. You should, in Latin America, will also be on the alert. USA is the spearhead of U.S. imperialism, and it must be fought in every sense and sphere. Thank you. Now I give the floor to Esteban Subet from the Movimiento al Socialismo of Chile, and next will be Jaime Caicedo from the Communist Party of Colombia. So Esteban, you have the floor. Please be brief. Can you hear me? Yes. Comrades of the Communist Party of Cuba, fraternal greetings for the Cuban people and your Communist Party, and to the government of Comrade Díaz-Canel. Also greetings for Mónica Valente, and through her to all the comrades of the Sao Paulo Forum. Cuba is not alone. Cuba shall overcome in the face of this new attack by imperialism and the forces that have been trying unsuccessfully, and they will always be unsuccessfully, for many years with the blockade and with many other actions to destabilize the Cuban Revolution, but they haven't been able to do it. Cuba is defending itself on its own, but Cuba is not alone, because we, the peoples of Latin America and the Caribbean and the world, are also defending it. In 1966, Salvador Allende attended the Intercontinental meeting and the OLAS meeting. Today, there is time for a new Tricontinental and OLAS meeting in the face of the new world events. For the Chilean people, the Salvador Allende people who are friends to Commander-in-Chief Fidel Castro during the building of socialism, and then after the coup d'etat, the Chileans were helped generously by Cuba, and now defending Cuba, as Chavez said, means paying love with love. Cuba should be defended by all well-intentioned Latin American and world people, and by the democratic and progressive forces. So last Saturday, we, the Sao Paulo Forum forces, went to defend the Cuban embassy in Santiago in the face of the outbreak of gusanos and extreme right Chileans who tried to attack them, but they didn't pass because we defended the embassy as Cubans defended their own country there. Please receive great embraces from the people and the country of Salvador Allende. Let's put an end to the blockade, and we express our solidarity with you. Thank you very much for your very kind words. Now I'll give the floor to Jaime Caicedo from the Communist Party of Colombia, and after him we will have Jorge Mazarovich of the Communist Party of Uruguay. Comrade Jorge Caicedo, you have the floor. Good afternoon to you all. On behalf of the Colombian Communists, I express our unconditional solidarity with the Cuban Revolution, its government, and its achievements, and the successes it has scored in the midst of the present difficulties we are all familiar with. The solidarity of the Colombian people, therefore, includes a feeling of great gratitude because of Cuba's contributions to the peace process in our country, which is having an impact on Latin America, and which, of course, must be continued on the basis that we draw back the idea that Cuba is a shelter of terrorists as stated by the Colombian government. We Colombians have a moral duty of reparation of this relationship with the Cuban people, now the more so because we would have been defending the Cuban embassy in Bogota, promoting the dissemination of the meaning of the present resistance of the Cuban people in their struggle against the blockade. Comrade Canel and the government people and the party people and the CDR people and Joanna and Polanco and everybody there should know that we do send to you our fraternal and solidarity embrace, and that we will continue permanently with our struggle and continuously be on the alert. Thank you very much for your words. Now I'll give the floor to Comrade Jorge Mazarovich of the Communist Party of Uruguay. After him, Jose Castillo from PRD of Panama will speak. Jorge, you have the floor. Jorge, are you listening to us? Can you listen? Can you hear us? Perhaps the signal has been interrupted. There's no sound. Then Jorge Masarovich, can you hear me?
No, no creo que no está con el sonido. Mientras
As we solve the connection problem for Jorge Masarovich, we will give the floor to Jose Castillo from the PRD of Panama. Castillo, you have the floor. I can see you. Can you hear me?
Puede ser que yo tenga el micrófono apagado.
Perhaps my mic was off, but I thought you didn't hear me. I mean, either you or Jorge. Okay, Comrade Jose Castillo from Panama. Can you hear me? Okay. Jorge Masarovich, are you ready? Yes, I'm ready. Monica, can you listen? Can you hear me? Yes. Yes, please. Go on. Oh, I thought you didn't want to hear me. No, that's not the case. Please. Thank you very much. First, we would like to send great greetings to all those participating in this meeting, which is so important because all the things we know about. I would like to convey to you a great hug to the Cuban delegation, and especially to my comrade and friend with whom we shared many things, Comrade Polanco. For Uruguayan communists who have participated in the expressions of solidarity to Cuba and the defense of the Cuban embassy in our country, the immense feeling of solidarity towards the Cuban Revolution reminds us of all these years when Cuba solidarity and Cuban Revolution solidarity were and will continue to be a token of the Uruguayan Communist Party. We support everything the Cuban revolutionary people are doing. We support the statements by the Frente Amplio, including the Federation of Students and Women's Movement and so on. Also, that with Cuba. Finally, I would like to say that undoubtedly today, as many times before, but today the onslaught of imperialism is going, and we do feel that the Cuban Revolution, of all things, is at stake. It is defending itself and can defeat imperialism. But our solidarity is also a solidarity to Cuba, also includes solidarity to our own people. Without the Cuban Revolution, if they hit it even more than now, then the suffering and the reliance and the crushing of Latin American popular struggles would be even greater. That is why we trust so much the struggle of the Cuban people. We send great greetings to President Díaz-Canel and to our dear friend and brother Raúl Castro. So thank you for this opportunity for expressing the solidarity of Uruguayan communists toward the Cuban Revolution and our readiness to continue and support the indispensable unity of Latin American and other peoples of the world against imperialism. And that's why we have been carrying out our actions for Cuba, particularly solidarity actions. It is not enough that it is not necessary that Cuban friends tell us what to do, because in spite of distances, we know that this solidarity with Cuba will also mean reivindication and the struggle for our own people. Thank you. Thank you, Comrade Masarovich. Now I'll give the floor to Comrade Jose Castillo of the PGD of Panama, and then after Castillo, I'll give the floor to Chindulivo from the Alliance for Democracy of the Dominican Republic. I request the other speakers to shut off the microphone so that we can hear the speaker clearly. Now, Comrade Castillo, I saw you on the video, so you have the floor. Comrade Castillo, PRD from Panama.
Castillo, ¿me oye?
Can you hear me?
¿Me oyes, José Castillo?
Sí, te escucho.
Yes. Yes. Maybe if you can shut your video off, I can hear you better because of the connection situation. Okay, I'm ready. Okay. Thank you very much, Monica. I'll be very brief. I'd like to express on behalf of the Secretary General of PRD, Comrade Pedro Miguel González, our fraternal greetings to the Cuban, the government, and the Party of Cuba in the face of this gross maneuver against Cuba, pretending that there is a social break. Social violent events in Cuba are part of a well-written script by those who for 60 years have been trying to reverse the Cuban revolutionary process. Those attempts so far has failed and were thwarted quickly. Everything seems to indicate that an outbreak, political outbreak, social outbreak is a sort of digital intervention developed against Cuba by the most backward people in the United States government, because Washington doesn't understand that Cubans will not stain their nation and will defend it in the face of coming danger. Any analysis on Cuba cannot ignore the harsh realities being imposed by it, by the economic, commercial, and financial blockade of the United States, and whose origins, as been said already, go back to the 1960s. Panama has a debt of international solidarity due to the help we received from Cuba on the struggle for the recovery of the canal sovereignty. That led to great friendship between the founder of our party, Torrijos, and the Cuban Revolution leader, Fidel Castro, during the Torrijos visit to Havana, when he condemned the U.S. blockade against Cuba, and he coined a phrase: each hour of blockade against Cuba is 60 minutes of continental shame. As PRD, we would like to reaffirm this commitment with the government and the people and the party of Cuba. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Comrade Castillo, for your words. Now we'll hear Comrade Chito Olivo of the Alianza por la Democracia of the Dominican Republic. After Tito Olivo, we will have Marisa Espinales from the Sandinista Front of Nicaragua. Comrade Chito Olivo, you have the floor. Good afternoon. From Quisqueya, Santo Domingo, we send our solidarity expressions for Cuba. Before we became a nation, when an Indian woman, an Aborigine called a man called Atue, went to Cuba and tell the Aborigines of Cuba that what the colonialists were doing but when Santo Domingo was bad. From then, our solidarity to Cuba was shown by a Dominican who went there to fight for Cuban independence, Máximo Gómez, together with Máximo Gómez, however, to struggle for independence. There were many other Dominicans who were there to fight with the Cuban people for their independence. When Commander Fidel Castro decided to continue or to carry out the struggle to free Cuba from the Batista dictatorship, a Dominican was with him on the Granma. The pilot of the Granma, Niquilino Mejias. And so solidarity with Cuba has always been there among our people and between the two peoples. Cuba welcomed Colonel Camaño, who faced 42,000 SOBs, as Chilean poet said when Santo Domingo was invaded in 1965. That stained for the second time in the 20th century the sovereignty of our territory, of our country. From here, we express our solidarity, and that's something that hasn't been said. On July the 26th, took place in Cuba, the attack on the Moncada garrison, and from there on, Cuba has been attacked by Yankee imperialism. You have the sinking or the blowing of the La Cubre vessel in March 1960, the Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961. All the sanctions that have been imposed on Cuba, the blowing in October of 76 of a civilian airliner, the sabotages against hotels, the introduction of viruses and bacteria to affect farming and other productions in Cuba. That is why, in the face of such new aggression, the Cuban people are being victimized by. We from Quisqueya, Santo Domingo, we express our solidarity with the Cuban brothers and sisters. Thank you. Now I give the floor to Comrade Marisa Espinales from the Sandinista Front of Nicaragua. After Marisa, we will give the floor to Rodrigo Granda, advisor of Comunes of Colombia. Marisa, you have the floor. Thank you, Monica. Good afternoon to all comrades committed with the defense of the Latin American Caribbean Revolution. We would like to say that we express our solidarity with the sister people of Cuba, with whom we have been facing the same format. And as Nicaragua defeated the failed coup d'etat, Cuba will prevail and defeat this new strategy by the empire. On behalf of the Sandinista Front and our General Secretary, Daniel Ortega Saavedra, we reaffirm our commitment with peace, international law, no interference into internal affairs of other countries. We condemn the unjust economic blockade against Cuba, and from any place, from a political forum or as parliamentarians, we will continue defending the Cuban people to live in peace, to decide on their own model, and to defend their sovereignty and their revolution. This commitment we are reaffirming today with actions and denunciations and statements from Parliament. And here we are steadfast in Nicaragua by carrying away a great mobilization with the Cuban ambassador Juan Carlos so that our people are more aware and know about the achievements of the 60th revolution of Cuba, a revolution that has given us an example of resistance and endurance. Cuba shall prevail. Thank you. Thank you, Maritza. Now I'll give the floor to Comrade Rodrigo Granda, who is the advisor for international relations of the Partido Comunista of Colombia. After him, after Rodrigo Granda, we will give the floor to Ana Prestes from the Communist Party of Brazil. So, Rodrigo, you have the floor. Good afternoon, Monica. Good afternoon also to Comrade Polanco and Comrade Arzuaga and to Comrade Juana, and special greetings for Fernandez de Cosillo, who was one of the speakers. I do not know whether he will finally speak, but he was a key participant in the previous dialogues in Havana, where we were having discreet and secret dialogues. The provocation that started on July the 11th last was financed, directed, and orchestrated from abroad. We know that this 26th of July, the people of Cuba will give another smashing answer, as they did before, and they will always defend national unity by the party and the people. Those actions were synchronized. Here there were groups of far-right exiled Cubans and also Venezuelans who were paid to attack the embassy. There has been a permanent mobilization of Colombian revolutionaries, and we are protecting the embassy and the ambassador Egat Ponce and all the comrades who have assumed a very courageous attitude, and they have told us what's really happening in the island. To us, this came rather as a surprise because we know where these provocations are brewed, and we also know, however, that you Cubans, with the solidarity of the whole continent, will defeat once again the empire. Thank you very much. Thank you, dear Rodrigo. I'll give the floor to Comrade Ana Prestes from the Communist Party of Brazil. After her, there will be Carlos Castañeda of the Farabundo Martí Front of El Salvador. Now you have the floor. Hello, Monica, thank you. Good evening to you all. I would like to say on behalf of the Communist Party of Brazil, our president is not with us, but she has been listening to the speakers, and we must say that here in Brazil are mobilizing ourselves every day in the last few days, and we will continue mobilizing ourselves to expose what is actually happening because of this media and cyber attack that stimulates very opportunistic mobilizations for the empire. At this very moment, when the consequences of the Trump administration sanctions and the pandemic and the economic situation are being felt, all countries are having difficulties because of the pandemic. So we must say that here, among the social movement and youth movements, we are for Cuba. We have just elected a lady, the chair lady of the Students' Union, National Union, and we are increasing our solidarity and disseminating correct information and communicating so that people know about the truth about what's happening in Cuba today. So count on us always. Greetings to you all. Thank you, dear Anna. And I'll give the floor to Carlos Castañeda for the FMLN of El Salvador. After him, we will have Comrade Ricardo Canesi of the Wazoo Front of Paraguay. Comrade Carlos, you have the floor. Comrade Carlos Castañeda, can you listen? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? I can't see you, but I think you cannot listen, cannot hear me. Well, let's give the floor then to Comrade Ricardo Canesi of the Wazoo Front. Let's see if we can later listen to Comrade Castañeda. Ricardo Canesi of the Wazoo Front of Paraguay. Can you hear me?
O Ricardo Canesi também não? Será que sou eu que estou com...
Maybe it is I who is having connection problems.
Ustedes me oyen?
Can you hear me? Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you very well. All right. Then Comrade Carlos Castañeda of the FMLN of Salvador. You have the floor. Comrade Ricardo Canesi of the Wazoo Front, Paraguay. Castañeda, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Comrade Alan Chavez of the PSVAUD, from our dear Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. You have the floor. Good evening. Great Bolivarian greetings and Chavista and Antipolis greetings to you. It is a pleasure to be here talking to you. Briefly, I would like to reaffirm once again our solidarity with the people of Cuba and the government headed by Comrade Diaz-Canel. We know that the script that they are trying to implement in Havana, and as you know, I am here in Havana. I am now the ambassador of Venezuela to Cuba. Now, the script they are trying to implement here is similar to the one they have tried to carry out in Venezuela. It is an attempt to infiltrate or to use all the delinquents who are being paid by U.S. agencies to create social breaks in our countries to justify then a possible foreign intervention, that there is a civil war in the country in question. I mean, the scripts are very similar. We must be very much on the alert, comrades, because as they have used it in Venezuela and they have tried to use it in Cuba and Nicaragua and other countries of the world and of the Americas, imperialism and its allies will continue waging the same war. So we must be very united, and we will continue resisting and overcoming. So we express our full solidarity to the Cuban people and the government led by Díaz-Canel. As I said, Cuba and Venezuela in this struggle have a single banner. Our National Assembly recently passed an agreement supporting the struggle by the Cuban people and, of course, rejecting the interference attempts by the U.S. imperialism and its allies. We are brothers in our struggle and we will continue waging the struggle together since as we did when the Bolivarian Revolution began with Hugo Chavez. We have the implementation of an agreement in Cuba and Venezuela assigned by Chavez and Fidel, and that has brought a lot of benefits to the Venezuelan people. We are struggling for the sovereignty and freedom of our countries. A great greeting to you all. We will continue together in our unity, the unity in the Americas and the unity in the world, to deal with and thwart the hegemonistic attempts and desires of U.S. imperialism. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Comrade Alan Chavez, for your words. Let's see whether Comrade Carlos Castañeda has been able to establish the connection again. Castañeda from the El Salvador's Farabundo Martí Front.
Parece que no. Companheiro.
He seems not to be able to connect. Comrade Canesi from Iguazu Front from Paraguay, are you there? Comrade Castañeda, I can see you, but can you hear me? Comrade Canesi from the Iguazu Front in Paraguay. Ricardo Canesi, Iguazu Front from Paraguay, are you there? So I now give the floor to Comrade Eduardo Berniez from the Frente Amplio from Uruguay, and then to Comrade Najib Amadou from the Communist Party of Paraguay. Eduardo Berniez, go ahead. Here I am. Can you hear me well? Okay. Good afternoon. It is a pleasure to be able to share with you today. In my case, I was not able to participate in this wonderful mobilization as mentioned by Guasarovich because I am being under quarantine. But I would like to add a couple of issues here. It is not a mere coincidence that these U.S. government agencies are making this right now. The U.S. government is suffering a crushing defeat at the UN, reiterating the need to put an end to the criminal blockade. The image of Cuba is growing bigger with its health system and solidarity in the world. The success of the vaccines to cope with the pandemic offers a sovereign decision over and above commercial issues. After the 8th Congress of the Communist Party of Cuba and the relevant resolutions adopted regarding the economy and the development, a very positive impact is expected for the island. Groups in all continents are making donations contributed from their own pockets, from their own work, to break with the blockade, and the U.S. is ever more isolated. These the imperialists know. That is why the increased pressures on Cuba from the U.S., they can build the narrative they want. They can continue to resort to the main media. The U.S. government could continue to hand over millions of dollars, expanding their embassies, financing and training terrorists to defeat legitimate governments and prop up illegitimate governments. But these expressions manifested freely are opposed to the massive expression of the Cuban people taking to the streets in support of the revolution, and this was seen by everybody in the means that have not been harassed by the media siege. As different from Chile, Colombia, or Haiti, where the blood of demonstrators and social activists and peaceful activists have been scandalously shed, in Cuba, human rights are respected. Millions of people in the world are condemning the criminal U.S. policy. Those of us who do that are cooperating really with Cuba to send the inputs that the U.S. is preventing. There are many organizations making their contributions. There are Cubans residing abroad who are also making their contributions. Most of all Cubans who do not live in Cuba do not support the blockade. This is a clear truth expressed very firmly. Eduardo, please be brief. The way to peace and the happiness of people is not the war or the invasion of countries under the guise of humanitarian interventions. The way to peace is to put an end to the economic, commercial, and financial blockade imposed by the U.S. against Cuba, the ceasing of terrorist actions against the island, respect for their independence and sovereignty, and the right to choose the destiny of our own. Thank you, Eduardo. Sorry. The last speaker who will take the floor is Comrade Najib Amadou from the Communist Party of Paraguay. He will convey brief greetings. Good afternoon or good evening for all of you. Fraternal greetings, particularly on behalf of our organization to the Cuban comrades, the party, the Communist Party. Right now, an activity is being held in support of Cuba, calling for an end to the blockade and against the attacks perpetrated by the American imperialism. For some days now, we have been working very hard in solidarity with Cuba, with the Cuban embassy. Last week there was a provocation perpetrated by a handful of elements contrary to democracy and self-determination of the peoples, whom we confronted right at the entrance of the Cuban embassy. And we followed the path of Commander Fidel Castro in the defense of the self-determination of the peoples, calling for the ceasing of the blockade so that this revolution can show all it can do in addition to all it has done. Long live the Cuban Revolution and the Cuban people. Thank you very much, Najib. Cuba shall prevail, of course. And now I give the floor to the comrades of the Communist Party of Cuba for their comments, their farewell, in order to end this wonderful meeting. Comrades.
Ya, Polanco.
Buenas.
Well, dear brothers and sisters, members of the Sao Paulo Forum, we want to thank you all for your kind words and the way in which you have expressed your solidarity with the Cuban Revolution. We also want to thank the Communist Party of the socialist countries that have been invited to this virtual meeting, online meeting. We are very touched and moved due to your solidarity and your support of the parties and organizations you represent at the time when our people thanks the solidarity and support of all of you. The Cuban Communist Party ratifies its support to the Sao Paulo Forum in the 31st anniversary and reiterates our commitment to promote unity against in the anti-imperialist activity and the respect of the sovereignty of our countries, movements and organizations, as our Commander-in-Chief Fidel Castro Ruz stated when he talked to the delegates of the 6th Congress of the Cuban Communist Party. You can be certain that Cuba will prevail. Together we will prevail. Homeland or death, we shall prevail. Thank you. Well, this is the end of this meeting. I want to thank all those who have participated, particularly our friends from Cuba and from the Foreign Affairs Department of the Cuban Communist Party. Onwards to victory. Cuba shall prevail.
Tchau, gente. Foi um prazer.
¿Qué dice?
Venceremos.
Venceremos. Ella es muy apasionada. Sí. Bueno.
Y acabo de terminar.
Sí.